Welcome, 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 everyone, to another wonderful podcast and another wonderful day with another wonderful lady called Sarah Ennor. Ennor, did I get that right, Sarah?
Ennor.
Ennor. I'll get there in the end. You know me and
Okay.
surnames, people. I'm terrible for it. But this is going to be a wonderful podcast. And thank you, Sarah, for being with us. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I don't appreciate anything more than someone who lets me have a later day podcast recording because I am not a morning person.
Oh, aren't you? Oh, I'm definitely a morning person. Usually get up
Mm.
about 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm usually cool with that. But anyway, and also a night person, so that
I was
says
gonna
it all.
say 3 is my bedtime. I don't know what you're talking about, but
Really? Well, okay. Well, what we'll do, we'll start as I usually start. Clueless Eli does not have a clue what you're all about, where you do, and what your backstory is. So please tell us what you do for business to help people be successful, and then we'll go with the flow.
sure. So I am a speaker, and my goal is to make ADHD human, very specifically. So I'm passionate about working with businesses and law firms and using my story to actually explain,
Mhm.
um, to sort of show and help people connect with the idea that ADHD is not simply a deficit. Sure, we have some
Mhm.
challenges, but in fact, it's the way our brain is wired. So as a person who's gone through, I was only diagnosed last March, so two
Mhm.
Marches ago, so in 2023,
Mhm.
and I'm starting to realize things like my personality is not just my personality. It's made up of a lot of the ways that I'm wired to think. All the greatest things I do at work are because of my traits from ADHD, and all of the things I get constructive criticism for are some of the things that people consider negative that I feel could have just been supported and would have been perfectly good traits to have at work as well if we could move away from some of the traditional societal ways we look at things. So the goal is to help these businesses understand that ADHD is just a human
Mhm.
uh, neurotype, and that it can actually be very profitable in the same
Mhm.
way as it's profitable to have any other difference involved in your decision making. You get better decisions, better outcomes, and yeah, when you have belonging, you have better retention, and so that's what I'm trying to help businesses take their first steps on.
Mm.
um, you asked me about backstory a little bit too. I won't go into much because you'll probably ask questions, I imagine, once I unload this, but I'm a lawyer by training. So I've practiced law. I articled at a big firm here in Canada,
Mhm.
and I worked in-house at large banks before going out and practicing on my own for a while and shifting into this speaking when I realized I had a voice and I needed to help people understand this stuff. And I'm also an international athlete and coach and,
Wow.
um, you know, all kinds of different elements of intersectional existence. So,
Well, we'll talk about that for sure. So,
sure.
what made you try to diagnose yourself for ADHD? So, what were you seeing recently in your life that you thought, You know what, I've got to get diagnosed"? What happened?
Well, the first thing that happened was I went to a cocktail party and someone asked me if I had it.
Oh, really?
I was, yeah, so I was trying to figure out how I was going to make this sole practice I was running turn into something profitable, because I had sort of been letting it languish and not really super interested. And I was describing all these ways that I was going to make it something that fed into my strengths, and then I disassembled it because it got overwhelming with all the administration or all these things that
Mhm.
I wasn't going to be great at.
Yeah.
And on the third version of the business, this woman said, "Do you have ADHD? I see a lot of ideas and a lot of really great ideas, but not a lot of completion. And I'm seeing a lot of overwhelm and overthink."
Mm.
And of course, what came as a total shock to me, I wasn't thinking, "Oh, yes, this makes total sense." It had never once occurred to me in my life before that, because
Mhm.
I had all the same stereotypes lots of people have, that it's little boys and they're disruptive in school and their
Yes.
parents aren't giving them enough discipline. And
Yes.
so I hesitate sometimes to admit this, but the truth is, reels on Facebook started to really resonate. They started
Mm.
serving themselves to me as I was having these conversations with friends and family. And when I started to see some of them feeling very real for me, I decided to seek a diagnosis. So
Mm.
that's how that panned out, but it was a shock.
And with that shock, how did you take it?
Uh, I'm a pretty confident person that thinks
Mm,
I'm wonderful. So I was like, all right, if I have this, it must not be so bad. I've
mm,
been very successful throughout my life. I got through law school, but I also started to think that it made a lot of things make sense.
mhm,
Some of my friends from law school suddenly understood why the day before an exam, I was asking them to help me out with their summaries for the exam. And, last minute I'm making plans for my birthday. They all had I'm a Valentine's baby. So, you're asking me now, but we have dates. And I thought, well, but it's my birthday. And I know it's the day of my birthday, but why are we doing something?
yeah,
So that impulsiveness made a lot of sense. And I would say over the last couple of years, it's just been a journey of understanding what the symptoms are, how they show up in my life.
okay,
Looking at how you see them show up on social media or for other
mhm,
people. And sometimes you dismiss them and think, oh, I don't have a million voices in my head talking all the time. But as I've processed some of this, I've realized, oh, actually, I do. I just don't visualize it as voices, right? I have all those thoughts
yeah,
competing for my attention, but I,
mhm,
I don't visualize it in the same way as these other folks do. So, yeah, there was a bit of grief too. If
really?
maybe that's where
Let's
you
talk
were.
about that.
Yeah. So part of what made me try medication in the first instance was the fact
Uh-huh,
that I had been feeling depressed and anxious quite a bit over the past maybe 5 years,
okay,
trying to make my business move forward, feeling like I was a very ambitious person, but I couldn't seem to figure out which direction I wanted to go.
okay,
um, Lost interest in leaving my house, felt it was a hard time to kind of get dressed in the morning sometimes.
mm,
Um, and I felt, knowing people with depression and how they described it, I was like, doesn't really quite feel like depression, but it
mhm,
definitely has the symptom, losing interest in things, for example, or,
yes,
not going out with your friends. That is a symptom, but I didn't feel completely down all the time.
yes,
But the anxiety part, I had been to my doctor saying, my chest is fluttering, I'm not
mhm,
sleeping at night, I'm having all these issues. And she kept sending me to different doctors to check out ear, nose, and throat, neurology, had migraines, all of that. And so the grief, I guess, came from thinking, what if I had known this when I left
mm,
my big corporate jobs and thought, I'm going to go find something else? Like, how might I have approached that process so that I didn't feel like I'd wasted so much time,
okay.
both continuing in my private practice and also then being so unsure of what the next step could possibly be.
Yeah, it was a very difficult time, and 5 years is a very long time at the same time. And at the beginning of those 5 years, what triggered it? So was that the start of a business, or was it something more than that, or accumulation of a few things?
Yeah, so the 5-year mark that I'm talking about is when I was starting to feel down. I left my job about 10 years ago, my in-house job.
Hmm.
And at first, I'd started my legal business in 2017, and it was fine. I was talking to friends and family, and all of that was great. Um, but I think what was happening is I knew I didn't really want to be doing that anymore. And my
Okay.
parents had always told me I could do anything I set my mind to if I work at it. And I just
Hmm.
thought, everything is an awful lot of things to try to figure out what I want to do, right?
Of
And I
course.
didn't really. I'm tied. I was at the time very tied to my identity as a lawyer, which,
Okay.
I trained and I'd worked so hard and paid so much money to become one, and I'd been successful at it, that I wasn't really sure why every time I thought of a different way to use that legal training, I wasn't feeling inspired. I was still not drawing people to me that were willing to pay what I
Hmm.
thought I was worth, for example. So I think it was mostly just this feeling that I'm ambitious. I want to be successful. It's
Hmm.
impacting my relationship as well. I'm
Okay.
married, and being the one not making money when we used to be a very equal partnership was
Yeah.
was stressful for me.
Hmm.
So all of those things, just really not knowing which way to go or which way to turn, and at the same time sinking into feeling physically and emotionally not so well.
Hmm.
It just kind of spiraled, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it is very difficult on a relationship, especially when you don't know exactly what's going on, such as you didn't know you was ADHD.
Mm,
So you were clueless, and also it must be very difficult for your husband, because if you didn't know, he definitely didn't know.
Yeah.
Because and that must have been a very, very difficult 5 years between the both. I take it you were married over the 5 years.
A little bit before that. We're at 8 years now. So
Yeah, yeah. So
mhm.
that was obviously a strain on your relationship. So when we're talking about hindsight now, let's talk about hindsight. Now, you've obviously recently you found out you're ADHD, but now with hindsight, and you've obviously had the aha moments. Um, how far can you go back realizing you had the ADHD, be that as a child or further back?
Sure. Well, first of all, you may know that to be diagnosed, you have to remember this back in your childhood.
Mm.
But let's put it this way. When I asked my mother if she was surprised when I told her I had been diagnosed, she said, "Of course not. You couldn't pay attention to a thing when you were a kid."
Ah,
When I this summer went and visited the mom of one of my very close friends from grade 2 and sort of grade school,
mm,
I was telling her this story, and she said, "Oh my God, this makes so much sense. You were nuts. You were crazy. You're making dances and playing games, and you were hyper, and you were, yeah, all of that stuff when I was a kid." Now, obviously, that is more so when I was feeling safe in my friends and family's homes.
mm,
Um, and you may also know that women tend to present quite differently often than men do with
mm,
ADHD. That
mhm,
hyperactivity might be mostly in their minds and the thoughts sort of
mhm,
keeping them occupied, which I have, but I also had this outward hyperactivity as well. So yeah, that plus all of the physical symptoms that go along with it, or that can. So for me, migraines, I've had them since forever. I used to miss school all the time in grade
really?
2. I remember being at a museum in the mummy room, and it was dark with slit windows and gray and bright light in the dark room just would trigger a migraine. Um, the chronic pain, from I think from tension, to be honest, just always thinking, oh,
Okay.
I should be doing something else, had been exacerbated in recent years, which I attributed to my sports, because I play a very physical Australian football.
Okay.
Um, and so, I assumed it was that, but it turned out not to be. It turned out that as soon as I managed my symptoms to some extent, or was able to accept them a little bit,
Hmm.
the physical, the anxiety, the depression, um, almost evaporated. So it's pretty, yeah,
Hmm.
it's been my whole life that a lot of this stuff has been going on for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult as a child. So, as your mother was saying, you couldn't focus. You had pain. There was lots of things going wrong. How did it affect you having relationships? Let's say, for instance, with your peers. How did those dynamics work with the ADHD?
Yeah, so I will distinguish I couldn't focus from in two different ways. So I definitely had no problem focusing on details and doing well in school. I had great
Hmm.
grades. If I talk to a teacher now, they would say, "Well, how could this be? You've got these wonderful grades,
Hmm.
90s, that kind of thing." But
Yeah.
when it came to my interest, I should say, I was just drawn to all different activities, people,
Mm.
all of that. And so I actually found my relationships with my peers on the whole pretty good. I mean, I was bullied a little bit as a kid for probably being either too confident or too willing to ask to play with people at times, and too
Yeah.
forgiving even maybe. But I was also the person in high school who got along with every different group. I was in with the smart people, and I was in with the jocks, and I was in with just the different people. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think my relationships as a child were largely fine, aside from a couple of outlying
Hmm.
uh, things, and I had great support from my family, um, you know, believing that I should just continue to march at the beat of my own drum and not worry what others thought of me. And so, um, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And same with babysitters and all of those people that have been in my life over the years.
Oh, that's great.
Hmm.
So, what positives do you see with the ADHD when you was a child? So now, again, you're looking in hindsight, and so what positives do you see with the ADHD that helped you excel in certain areas?
Well, if we're talking about childhood, to be honest, Eli,
Mm.
like I was just fun as heck, you know?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I was impulsive and interested in trying things. I was kind to people. I was always wanting to learn what folks had to say.
Mm.
In school, I think that curiosity really served me.
Mhm.
It can be annoying sometimes for teachers, and it really depended on the teacher, whether they
Mhm.
appreciated that I asked all these questions or whether they felt they were being attacked in some way for,
Mhm.
um, who knows if they even knew what the material was, to be honest, when I was asking, well, why, right? Um, Speaking of why, my mother, because I'm the mom, that's why. Like, go to your room, this conversation is over, kind of thing. It was very obnoxious, I think, for a lot. But yeah, that curiosity also just got me to be an expert in a lot of the topics I was studying in school, and
Okay.
great at making friends, great at walking into any room and having a conversation once I shook a little bit of the shy that I had in new environments. Um,
Mm.
yeah, as a child, I don't know, like, I suppose I look back and see more deficit than I do see positives, aside from those two I'm mentioning. At the end of grade 9, I
Mhm.
lived one city block away from my school. And at the
Okay.
end of the year, the principal met my parents and said, "You might want to give Sarah an alarm clock for her graduation present if you're thinking of a gift." So, I was late for the start of school. I was late coming back from lunch. I was definitely a procrastinator when it came to my assignments, but
Yeah.
like I never really saw that as a problem because I then turned in a paper that I wrote from the night before, and it got an A, right? So
Mm.
um, my dad probably thought it was a bit annoying when I ran into his room and like, I have this paper due tomorrow. I haven't even started it. And unwittingly, I think he was able to give me some tools like, you don't have to write the whole paper, Sarah. Just start with the first sentence and then come back and see me. Once I got the
Mm.
first sentence down, I had the whole paper flow out of me in no time. So that
Ah,
was sort of a fun trick that he didn't know he was offering to me. So
so it was always the start that you had the issue with. Once you was actually moving and going forward, then you could always execute and finish off.
yeah, so the interest-based nervous system, right? It
Mm.
really makes it tough to convince ourselves that we should act until we're interested.
Mm.
And that interest doesn't, I mean, my biggest interest trigger is urgency. So when something is last minute, that's when I'm ready to move forward on it. And by that point, when it's urgent enough that I'm willing to act, there is no room for pausing and waiting and thinking I'll put it down and forget about it because it's due and I have exactly the number of seconds I need to draft this paper now. So so it's easy to kind of have it flow
Hey,
out.
so it's the same thing throughout your life. Is that you need something to give you a good kick basically before you start. But once you started, then you flow forward, and then it's not too much of a problem.
Yeah, I would say as an entrepreneur, it's a little bit
Hmm.
different because I don't have the same types of deadlines. I don't have the same types of supports, and I have to drive my own schedule for the most part. So
Hmm.
I would say that it's tough for sure right now, figuring out how to keep myself on track, doing the, excuse me, doing the things I know I have to do. Excuse me. Um, Without that, I'm just gonna have this water here. One
That's
moment.
all right. Yeah, cool. And so, just the issue of being consistent, would you say?
Yeah. Um, I'm redefining consistent for myself.
Okay.
I don't think that consistent has to mean every day at the same time.
Okay.
I think consistent has to mean moving forward over time.
Mm.
I'm sorry, I don't know what I just choked on there.
That's no problem.
All
Yeah,
right.
because I had the same issue being consistent. I can do many things, but it's being consistent, which was always my issue. And
Yeah.
then I learned the thing is I had to be in a position where I had to be comfortable with myself and comfortable with who I was, with my
Yeah.
neurodivergent. And I didn't like showing my face. I didn't like using my voice. I thought I had an ugly voice, an ugly face. I didn't think I was capable of doing certain things, and that had to change. And since I've changed that, I've been more consistent because I'm happier with what I do. I am who I am. One of the reasons why me doing the podcast is to help as many people as possible so they don't have to go through it. And I suppose, as you was just about to say about consistency, consistency doesn't have to mean that you have to do it exactly the same day at exactly the same time. What can it mean?
Yeah, so I want to go back just for 1 second to what you're talking about with this acceptance of yourself. I think
Okay.
it
Hmm.
is the most important thing that
It
we
is.
can do with
Yeah.
being as a human being, let alone as
As a
someone.
human, forget about no, as a human being, acceptance
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And for me, I think maybe what feels more consistent to you when you are comfortable with yourself and maybe accepting of the ways that you work is that you're not trying to push yourself to do things that you're not going to do. Like we talked about, could I get a different time slot because you're in London, I assume London, yes.
Yes.
And I'm in Canada in Toronto, so we've got this time difference. Well, I'm not going to meet you at 7 a.m. my time because I cannot string a sentence together at that hour because I just
Uh-huh.
went to bed at 3, right? So I just rolled out of bed. I've got nothing to say. I need a minute for my medication to kick in. I need a minute to get my thoughts together. And so,
Mhm.
asking for what I need and saying, can we meet later in the day? And here we are streaming at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me, which is perfect timing.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it gets easier to be consistent because now I can do this thing easily. It's not a struggle. It's not an uphill battle
Mhm.
because I hate the thought of it.
Mhm.
Um, and so consistency for me, I think, looks more. It needs to take a longer time. I did a talk at the International ADHD Conference on ADHD in California a couple weeks ago, and it
Okay.
was called Unpacking Time. And we were
Mhm.
talking about how time relates to our goals and our motivation.
Okay.
And I think if we can look at our successes over a longer period of time, it's sort of like
Mhm.
a wave, right? You've got a wave crashing against a lump of rock on the shore, and it's many steps forward and then a bunch of steps back as it ebbs out,
Mhm.
drifts out into the ocean and goes again.
Yeah.
But in 10,000 years, you've got a cliff, right?
Yes.
And so we don't have 10,000 years, but we don't have to look at success as, did I do everything on my to-do list today? I
Mhm.
can look at it as, did I do everything on my to-do list this month? Did I
Mm.
do enough things on my to-do list? I can look back and say, are these things still actually even things I care to do? Are they interesting to me?
Mm.
And I let them go. And so, yeah, the consistency is trying to consistently show up for myself,
Mhm.
consistently show up for the people that are watching what I'm doing and the example that I'm setting, and in the talks that I give, making sure that
Mhm.
I'm doing the things that are most important to me and serving people the way I most want to. Um, but it doesn't have to look like this short term. Did I get up at the crack of dawn every day and go to the gym? Because the answer to that question is 100% of the time, no. I do
Ah.
it once every 365 days and then never do it again. That's just how that works.
But
Yeah.
I thought you was into fitness.
Well, I am into sports and games and playing.
Mhm.
I am not into the training element of that.
Okay.
Um, so one tidbit that a coach that I had gave me that I thought was very empowering
Mhm.
long before I knew I had ADHD. But he said, I want you to be doing the work that you need to do so that when selection comes, if you're not selected, you don't think back and think, oh, if only I'd done this one thing. Like, just know
Uh-huh.
that what you're working on is
Yeah.
your best in that moment so that,
Yeah.
there's nothing more you could have done. Um, I didn't really train for my time trials. I did a little bit because I knew it was in my head. Like, running for me, in my mind, if you can run for 5 minutes, you can run for an hour.
Yes.
But in my head, I'm like, oh, I hate this. When is this over? And I'm like, the sound of my
Mm.
feet on the ground. Oh, should I stop now? Can I take a rest? Like, this is a nightmare. So I knew I had to overcome some of that. But I would do a couple of runs and shave minutes off my time, just going 3 times before the time trial,
Yeah.
and getting my mindset in shape, right?
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I did the things that I needed to do. I knew also that my strengths as an athlete, because I was much older when I was selected to Team Canada to play Australian rules.
Mhm.
Um, I was in my early 30s and never thought I would have an opportunity to play at that level.
Okay.
But then in my second tour to Australia, I tore my ACL. Well, actually in the tryouts just beforehand. So I had surgery and, you know, I couldn't run comfortably or
Hmm.
confidently, I should say. And so I did bike work, you know, spinning classes and things like that. Right now, I'm really into jumping on a mini trampoline in my living room that is
Really?
orange and visible all the time. So when my
Okay.
watch tells me to stand up and walk around for a minute, I actually get up and jump like I'm a 2-year-old on a trampoline looking out my window to Lake Ontario. And I love this bite-sized bit of activity
Okay.
that is apparently very, very good for me, right? So what am I capable of and what do I want to do? And, you know, again, in Australian football, my strength was always being smart about where to be on the field, reading the play and knowing what was going to happen next and how to position myself and
Mm.
all of that stuff. And my tenacity, I would say, as well. And my
Mm.
skills. I was rigid on getting my kicks right and those kinds of things. And
Uh-huh.
so yeah, being the fittest person on the team, trying to be that would have been trying to fix myself for the things
Yes.
I'm not great at,
Hmm.
rather than doing my best to get in a reasonable level of shape to make a national team, but also focus on the things that I'm wonderful at and make sure that those were bang up and it was effective. So
So, actually, to be honest, your ADHD has been a blessing throughout your life. I mean, yes, you know, we have certain negativities, but you've actually done you've conquered um, some difficult things. Um, as you can see, you was older, you know, going into sports, and that surprised you. You're very intelligent because you do things at the last moment, but still excel.
mhm,
Um, Most people would be glad to be in that position to be able to do it in the last moment. Yes,
mhm,
it was part of a panic, but you was able to do it, right?
yeah,
So no problems like that. Um, how did it affect your relationships? Like, for instance, you being ADHD, doing things in at the last hour and etc. How did it affect your um, personal relationships, such as husbands, boyfriends, etc.? What did they think about you? How did that go? How did that play out?
sure. Well, my husband hates to be spoken about, so we'll be careful with some of the examples here. Um, but you know, with him as an example, a great one is travel. He works overseas. He travels all the time.
Uh-huh.
He has his way. He likes to be early. He likes to not be rushed in any way.
Yeah.
Um, I hate being early. I would rather miss a plane than sit in an airport for too long. I'm getting better in my
Oh,
in my
I'm the same
old
way.
age.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
hate that too. I like
yeah,
to get there, just get on the plane, go.
correct. Yeah, yeah. But that is not for everyone. So if I want
Mm.
to travel together with an expert traveler who likes to be early, that's a bit of a thing. But you know, I recently started sharing the example of when we have to leave the house, right? Um, I say, what time do we have to leave? And I will
Mm.
respect your decision on what time that has to be. Great, we're
Yeah.
leaving at 5.
Mm.
But if you ask me at 15 minutes to 5, are you almost ready? Like, stop it, right? I get very snippety. And I was always told, you know, you're an anxious traveler. Why you get so worried when you're traveling? I don't know what this is
Uh,
about. I'm not actually anxious. But when I reflected a little bit, I've realized it's because I've left everything to the last second. If I have to
mm-hmm.
leave at 5, I have
Mm-hmm.
exactly the number of seconds I need to leave the house
Mm-hmm.
at 5. You
Mm-hmm.
start asking me if I'm almost ready and you pull me away from remembering my toothbrush,
Yeah.
like, stop it, right? Let me work towards my
Yeah.
time that I've set.
Yeah.
But recognizing that allows me now to say, okay, give me a time that is real for you, that doesn't require you anxiously to ask me over and over
Yeah.
when I'm going to be ready, right? So that last minute thing definitely can be a hindrance. There's a
Mm.
million other examples of little relationshipy things like that, setting the table before dinner and,
Mm.
you know, that kind of thing. But it was also an appeal at the beginning, right? I was
Mm.
asked out, I'm going to be in town on Tuesday. Do you want to go out? And I said, surely, this being Monday, you couldn't possibly mean tomorrow? Like, no, like I'm booked out forever, right? And then, oh, well, something opened up on a Thursday. Do you want to do that
Uh,
now? Oh,
mm,
okay, sure, right? So it was nice to know that I was an independent person that had my own life and schedule, and that I could also reach out at the last minute and say, is now a good time for a date,
mm,
and be spontaneous. One of our first trips, we just flipped a coin in the car, and every time we came to a junction, should we go north or should we go south? Flip a coin. Where are we going to go? Now, not going to lie, we went in a square first. We ended up kind of back where we started at first. But then we got ideas, right? And playing that game and being impulsive in that way took us to, a spa that we wouldn't have otherwise gone to, and an adventure across Ontario to a bunch of different things. So yeah, it's been both positive and difficult. I mean, I don't like doing things that bore me, and therefore chores are not a thing. So life can be expensive when cleaning help needs to exist, or grocery delivery needs to happen, because otherwise I won't eat, right?
Yeah, no.
So yeah, it's a negotiation. All relationships, though, are figuring out what we each do best, accepting those things, and figuring out how to navigate it. And it'll be a work in progress forever, I'm pretty sure.
No, those things resonate with me, especially the airport side of things. I tend to pack at the last hour, and I tend to sleep for no more than probably about an hour. So, for instance, if I'm starting to travel at 1 o'clock in the morning, I won't go to bed until the earliest 11 o'clock, and I won't pack until about 30 minutes before I go to bed. That's how I am. And that infuriates my partner. She goes, how can you do that? I don't understand how you can just pack it. What if you forget something? No, I'll forget something if I pack early.
Right.
Because the thing is if I'm packing early, I think I've got everything, because I've got plenty of time. And then at the last moment, I go, oh, no, I forgot. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I do. There's no focus, right? For me, I need that urgency to
I need
focus
that
my
agency, yeah.
attention.
I need that focus, yeah. And then I won't. So I'll go through my list in my head 3 times. Have I got this? Yeah, I have. Have I got this? Yeah, I have. Have I got it? Fine. I can now go to bed. And then I'm done. And then I'm at peace because I know I have everything. And then it goes, but I do understand it from other people's point of view. Can you do that? How can you get everything? What if you've forgotten the toothbrush and you have to go to the shop and buy it? And I go, no, I know in my head I've got everything. But you're totally right. But that's how it works.
But here's the question for you.
Go on.
What is the value of judging how someone else does something, right? Like, what use is it to say, how can you do that? Rather than just to accept it? Because if both of you accept it, I mean, if I have to go to the shop and buy a toothbrush, who cares? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it cost me $5 to buy a toothbrush that would have other cost me $2.39. Great. I had to buy an airport toothbrush. Fine. Or I go to a hotel and they have them in the little amenities closet, right? When I started to accept things like, there's nothing that I own that I couldn't replace if I needed to in the place I'm going, right? Like, I'm not packing, I don't know, my prized art piece, right? I'm packing toothbrushes and bathing suits and shoes, right? If I've forgotten something urgent, I'll just wear something else, or I will get something where I arrive, right? And that is the cost of me maybe not having the attention span I want, or a servant that walks around behind me and packs my bags for me. Like, I don't know.
But the thing is, the reason why it's so significant to them, and I totally understand it, because it reflects on them. Because remember, they're seeing it from the point of view, I can't do that, so how can you do that? How is that possible? And that's where that's coming from. And I totally understand it. I totally understand my partner, because my partner has to pack way before. And if she's coming from that mindset, and she knows if she leaves it at the last moment, she'll panic. She'll have issues, and she may forget. I get that. So you put yourself in my position, but as you, and that's why you're panicking. And I get that. But everyone's different, and it's okay to be different. And that's how I see things. So she does it her way. That's cool. My friend does it his way, and I'm fine with that, because I understand the difference in being neurodivergent, and that's how we're supposed to be. And that's why they panic, because they're thinking, I can't do that. How can you do that? That's not possible.
Well, and this is where the work that I do is so meaningful to me, right? Because the
Mm.
stuff I'm teaching in businesses applies equally to your relationships at home.
Same thing. Same.
Yeah. And I mean, we're all just human beings. Business and
Hmm.
employment is a relationship you have with your employer, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, so I try to use this hashtag. I'm trying to make it go viral. I keep saying this on every podcast. I haven't seen it go viral yet, but it's ask, listen, believe, right? Because if you can get curious about, your partner can say, well, how can you do that? Well, this is the reason why, because I don't have the level of focus I need if I'm not feeling under pressure to do it. I need to be interested.
Hmm.
I don't see so many of my friends when I was younger, they saw this planning a trip 6 months from now is such an exciting thing. Now they have something to look forward to. I'm like, I don't even see 6 months. I don't know what 6 months, am I alive? Do I work here anymore? Am I going on that trip? Has something else happened? I've fallen ill. I'm not traveling. Like, I'm not looking forward to something 6 months from now. I'm looking forward to something that's happening now or within 6 hours of now.
Hmm.
And so my focus is this way. Well, instead of saying, yeah, but I experience it this way, that sort of me too validation is really kind of invalidating to the person who says, well, but that's how I am. I can't pack early. I tried it with school. I went to the library. I had 100% of my grade was tied up in this 20-page essay I
Hmm.
had to write in university. I went
Hmm.
to it was my first time. So I went to the library and I sat for 45 minutes and I got books and I surrounded myself and I started looking and I took, 3 notes and then I got completely bored and thought, okay, I can't do this anymore. I got to go home. And I came
Wow.
back the next day and I did the same thing, but a little less time. And
Uh-huh.
then I didn't come again until the end of the semester 2 days before. And I wrote the whole paper and did all the notes and everything at once. Like, it's a much better use of my time. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm wasting my time when I'm
Yeah. Yeah. I
dibble
suppose.
dabbling in something. So let me explain how my brain works and how I function.
Yes.
Listen to what I'm saying. Feel free to ask again if you don't understand. Yes, but what do you mean by that? What does this look like for you?
Mm.
And
Mm.
then believe what I'm saying without overlaying, well, I would forget the thing if I didn't do it. Well, that's great. And I believe you when you tell me that. You should also try to believe me when I tell you I will forget the thing if I do it early, and I won't forget the thing more likely if
Yeah.
I do it closer in time, right? And so that, I think, is how we can very simply, without money, power, authority, any kind of title or
Yeah.
anything, we can start individually fostering belonging at work and at home and with friendships and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're totally right. And like I said before, business relationships, be that with your lover, your partner, it's all the same, but with a different hat,
Yeah.
basically. And when people understand that, it makes life just a little bit easier, because if you deal with the core issues that are with yourself or with other people, it ricochets with the rest of your life.
Hmm.
Um, life is quite interesting, and this is why I love having conversations, because I like to know how people tick.
Yeah.
But yeah, with what you do is amazing, how you're helping people to understand how we work and how that
Hmm.
can be applied in business, and how we show value within a business. And to be honest, I think we show more value within a business than any other normal way. And the reason being is because where we were weak on, because of AI, works on those weaknesses. We tend to have issues when it comes to text space, or specific issues when it comes to just trying to be consistent in our timing, rather than leaving things at the last hour. And AI takes over those things. And where we are strong in leadership, that's where the generic part of it, the organic part of it comes, and AI is left, behind for all of that stuff. And this is where we now shine. All the
Yeah.
things that, want for a better word, normal people are very good at, AI can now do. But the strengths that we have as neurodivergents, where we're great leaderships, where we're very good at the last minute things, where we just have to push through because we've had to, we've had to grow up and find ways to push ourselves and forge forward as quickly as possible. But with the advent of AI, I think it's really helping us go forward? That's anyway.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah, well, I would challenge you on some of that.
yeah.
So
Talk to me.
I both agree and disagree on some of it. So I don't really think that we're necessarily any better as a whole than the folks that tend to do some of those more mundane or routine tasks better. I definitely agree with you that AI is a huge support. You know, for my business, being able to have a piece of technology start to clip up a podcast for me so that I don't have to listen to the whole thing that's an hour long again and decide what is the best clip to put. Like that gets me over a hurdle to get started. Like I said, I have a hard time starting, right? So that gets me started, which is great. And I can get going on it. Things like, doing research and finding information. To some extent, AI is extremely helpful for that, for doing a first draft of a contract, that kind of thing. But I also think if we extend this whole relationship and brain type thing back to just relationships in general, I mean, someone's still got to be willing to schedule out what we're going to do with our family and how we're going to, you know, what things we're going to do with the kids and what things. I don't have kids, but I assume people do this, right? Who's going to take them to soccer? Like, it's not going to be the robot, or at least not yet. So there are still a lot of very routine things that I mean, my husband is so kind. He dropped me a bag full of groceries of things that are super easy for me to make while he's gone to work. I'm like, there could not be a better thing you could have done for me right now. I don't have to go to a grocery store now. I don't have to, you know, cook anything elaborate if I don't want to. So those little things that come naturally and aren't a hurdle for folks, I think exist in work too. I don't have one off the top of my head of what that is. But even, you know, if I do some legal research, for example, with AI, now I don't pay for it specifically, so I'm getting the very crappy version. But I mean, it's not giving me the right answer, right? And so there's still a place, I think, for people to validate that the information is right and support the research in different ways. And I also think there's a way for what I like to call neurodominant now. I've decided, a colleague made this word up and I love it. Neurodominant folks also can use AI to support their creative and out of the box thinking a little bit. It's not the same because obviously AI is trained on what it knows of what's on the internet. So there's not a lot of sort of total out there ideas maybe, but it might help be somewhat creative in the post you want to put up, right? You can put what your ideas are into AI and say, write this in a more creative way, or, you know, theme this around X, and they're able maybe to make use of some of that creativity that the ADHDers have put into the internet verse.
Well, I'd push that even further, because the thing is I understand that a lot of information is built on the internet, and quite a bit of it is wrong. But if you build AI in the form of, let's think of it as an agent or a box, and from a legal point of view, now, from a legal point of view, you have the documentation that's already been syndicated, you know, that the right legal documents, you build that AI with the correct legal documents, and then you're able, because it's not built on the internet, but built on actual legal documents, then it's easy to query. And this is where our neurodivergence and our creativity, we're very good at seeing puzzles. We're very good at being creative. As long as that box, that agent AI has the correct information, our creativity can pull that information very easily, where the average person couldn't. And this is the great thing with AI. If you build the AI with the correct information, that's done all the hard work. But with our creativity and how to pull that information, how to ask for that information, how to see the patterns, that is where the beauty comes into it. This is where we come into our own. So
sure.
Yeah, so it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting conversation. I love talking about this, but that's what I tend to do. So when I'm building things for my client, I build agents that has the correct information, be that theirs, a legality point of view, whatever, and it's built on their information or legal information. So when you are querying, it is always correct because it doesn't have all the rubbish that goes with it that you find on the internet. It's cleaned.
Well, I mean, we could debate this all day, because I would just remind you, especially in the legal context, that
Hmm.
everybody who has a contract
Hmm.
or has a question is a
Hmm.
human being.
Mm.
And your client has something they haven't told you, or something they did tell
Hmm.
you, that
Hmm.
needs to make its way in there, that will
Hmm.
not be reflected in any template. And so, yes, the creativity of us, for example, comes in,
Hmm.
like, how do we
Hmm.
do that? But also, I think the processing skills of a neurodominant person
Hmm.
also come in, because they can come in, read it, and say, oh wait, even if it's not anything creative, I know a fact over here that didn't make its way into this document. And
Hmm. Hmm.
lots of neurodivergent folks have challenges paying attention to detail, or,
Yeah.
catching all the nuances, right? And so
Yeah.
I think there's still a place where folks that are neurodominant will also thrive in that environment, and bring something
Oh,
additive
without doubt.
to the
Without a
conversation.
doubt.
Yeah.
And this is where the building of that agent of the AI comes into it. Because
Mhm.
we see certain things in a particular way, we're part of that process. And this is what I'm saying. We have certain skills that will help towards the end goal. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. There's no two ways
Yeah,
about
no.
it. And it's beautiful talking about it, I must admit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the beauty of, and we're still trying to find out how we still how can I say, how we still fit in the coming things that are changing with AI and new technology. um but what I can say is that we are great leaders, and we've had to be, because of the way we grew up, because of the way we masked. We had to try and be resilient. We had to find other ways, because we couldn't um, try to say things in such a way that would make us look silly or stupid or whatever. So we had to work on our own to make sure we didn't look that way. And because we had to fight our way through the stages, I mean, I had to do the same thing. I masked for so many years, and I had to somehow get the job done, even though I didn't get it done conventionally. So
Yeah.
I was forced to be creative. I was
Mhm.
forced to see patterns because I couldn't see numbers in a conventional way.
Yeah.
So by me growing up, having to teach myself to do things in a way that no one else would see that I did things in a unique way. As long as it came to the end goal, it was fine. So as such, I created a skill that worked for me, and hence I'm able to look at things and just see patterns and think, oh, how did I work that out? I don't know, but I had to find a way to do that. And I
Yeah.
think with neurodivergent people, it's pretty much the same, because we have to find a way to get it done, because we didn't want to show ourselves, really. How are we going to do this? um and that's my 2 cents on it. I'm not
I love
saying
what you're
everybody's the same. I'm not saying everybody's the same. I'm just giving
Yeah,
you
yeah.
an approximate of, but that's how I.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said about not wanting to look stupid and hiding that piece. It makes me wonder, because one of the biggest drivers for me of interest that
Mm,
looks like importance but really is just I'm interested, is my reputation. If I've committed something to
mhm,
somebody, like, I do
mhm,
not wish to fail, right?
mhm, mhm.
And maybe that is sort of me thinking I'm at risk of failing because I do this different way, because
Yeah,
I know I'm never going to start it in advance. And
yeah,
so, I have to really work very hard at the time that I do get down to it, because it's still
yeah.
got to be great, right? Because I
Mhm,
committed something, or because I committed to myself that I want to grade.
mhm,
Um, but I also was thinking, as you were talking about how wonderful it would be if folks like you and me, instead of having to burn so much energy hiding the
mhm,
ways we do things that
mhm,
still come to the right answer at the end of the day,
mhm,
imagine if we use that energy either to do more work of the stuff that we're great at, or
mhm.
to rest because we had more time, because look at us, we've got this thing done, because I didn't have to layer on,
Yeah.
whatever, 2 weeks of panicking that I wasn't going to start until the last minute. If someone had just said, it doesn't matter if you start at the last minute, start at the last minute. You always do a great job of writing a paper in 24 hours. Like, so what?
And that's a
How am I
blessing because,
down?
as you said, you have all that space where you can chill out, right? If you
Well, yeah,
accept,
but
go.
yeah, but not, yeah, exactly. If I accept it, but if I spend that 2 weeks worrying that I
That's
should
right.
otherwise be doing it differently,
Yeah,
then I'm becoming more anxious and I'm getting
that's
more
right.
stressed and I'm not resting and I'm not sleeping because I'm worried, right? And
Totally.
so that acceptance from ourselves, but also from others, is
Yeah,
what I'm trying to get folks to do so that we can
that's right.
all use our best strengths,
And
bring
this
them to
is,
the jobs.
and that's the most important thing. The most important thing is acceptance. Excuse me. Now I've got a frog in my throat. The most important thing is acceptance, because without that, you're going to struggle in every which way in your life, because all you're doing, if you're trying to play someone else, act out as somebody else, you cannot really act out your true life in the direction that you want to go in, because you're playing somebody else's role. Does that make
Yep,
sense?
I totally agree with you.
And this is why I had to, the last few years, I had to make that journey and say, you know what, you have to deal with your demons. You have to get over this, not liking your voice and your face and whatever else, because you should have been far more successful a long time ago. I'm sick to death of hearing people saying, Eli, why? You know, you can do A, B, and C. And this is one of the reasons why I did this podcast, because I don't want anybody to go through the lack of acceptance and struggling for far too long. It's a really difficult journey if you don't. It's far easier if you just take the plunge and accept yourself than when you don't. Because when you don't, you'll either go through a string of bad relationships, bad business decisions, so on and so forth, because you're acting in someone else's shoes, someone else's life. So you'll never get the life you always want.
Yeah. I also do a little bit of one-to-one work, and one of the conversations that I have with people is this word should being
Mm,
an absolute killer, right?
mm,
Like,
mm,
I should not have been more successful than I am today.
mm.
Would I prefer that I had done X or Y? Maybe, but I've been trying to figure out how I can say or come up with a way to describe what I would prefer as being something
Could have,
I would
could
prefer, I would
have.
want.
You could have, because that's a decision where whether that's a good or a bad thing. It's neither one or the other
But
by saying could have.
but coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? Like, it's too late to could have, right? So if I'm looking forward and say it instead and say, I didn't do these things, and I would prefer that in the next year I achieve X, or, even this very simple example I've given before
Mm.
is filing my taxes at the end of
Yeah,
the year. You
yeah.
know, I could say I should get it done because otherwise I'm going to get nagged by my husband and it's going to be late and I'm going to have to wait for my money and da 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 da
Mm,
da. Or I could say I want to because I want to get a good night's sleep. I want to
mm,
stop worrying about this, right?
mm,
So I prefer to get it done now for
mm-hmm,
this very
mm-hmm.
positive reason. Here's the solution I'm after,
Yeah.
rather than this backward looking, what could have been, what should have been, what would
Mm-hmm.
have been had I done something else. Because I think that's a part of acceptance, right? I didn't
Mm,
do those things, and that's okay. I did what I was, similar to the coach that said, do what you are gonna not regret in the end of the day. And
mm,
if you don't get where you want, I did my best. I wasn't sitting there thinking I should sit down and be lazy and not participate in this. I was in that place. I
mm-hmm,
felt these ways about myself. I felt these ways about how I had to interact with others at work, in the world. And now I've grown and changed and learned something new. And now
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
prefer to act in this way. I prefer to do things at the last minute and not
mm-hmm,
apologize
mm-hmm,
for it. I
mm-hmm,
prefer that if I'm late for something, instead of saying, I'm so sorry I'm late, I say, thank you so much for your patience, because I don't need to apologize for myself every time I turn around.
mm,
What do I prefer in the ways that I behave now? And it's new-ish to me. That I was on the want to rather than should before. Now I'm on the I prefer. but it takes practice, because we naturally say, oh, this person did this thing and it was so terrible, and there's such all these moral judgments about what they did and why it's a terrible thing. Or this person did this thing and I would prefer not to spend time with them because I don't
Yeah.
like feeling that way. I would rather feel this other way. I would prefer this other approach. Am I ready yet to say goodbye to that person or that behavior? Maybe not. But if I am, at least now I'm starting to think about it. And like, what is actually the solution if I don't like this thing? Oh, it might be to move. It might be to change jobs. It might be to break up. It might be, and I'm starting a productive, forward-looking, solutions-oriented conversation.
Yeah, and when it comes to things like that, I mean, I tend to just be blatant and just say, at the end of the day, it's my choice, whether that's something that's happened negatively to me from a relationship or whatever. I put myself in that position. Obviously, if I didn't do A, B, and C, so how do I go forward with that? That happened because I allowed that. Okay, so what do I need to do now and learn from that process to go forward? And I accept that. And by accepting this situation, not just me and what I've done in the past, but if I'm in a relationship with a person and it's a negatively affected me, yes, it may be the person's so-called fault, but ultimately it's my fault for allowing that to happen. So if I accept that, I can do something about it. While if I leave it in the other person's ballpoint and it's their fault, then there's nothing I can do about it, right? My life is always going to be the same thing, day in, day out, with that person or in that business or whatever. It's all to do with choices, and we ultimately make the choices. And if we accept the choices or not, whatever the case is, and we think, that's a terrible, I shouldn't have been treated like that, but that's my fault. Well, if it's my fault, I can do something about it. But if you leave it across the way, then it's always going to be a situation. And that's how I see things.
Yeah. I love this. I take full responsibility for my own feelings now.
That's right.
And it's great because no one can make me feel anything. I am allowing myself to feel a way because of something that happened, rather than take an action that allows me to feel differently.
That's right.
And you know what? When we can take that into work as well, I mean, the talent, imagine all of the things we've been conditioned to think, right? That the work relationship is not equal, right? I am beholden to my employer. They could fire me any moment, rather than I'm bringing something important to this company. I'm contributing something. I deserve to be paid. I deserve to be respected. I deserve to be supported in all the ways that I need it. If we could shake some of the conditioning that says, well, you just have to pull your socks up and do what you're told, and he's your boss, so you've got to do that thing. And instead we said, well, I could choose to do that thing, or I could choose to leave. I think we'd be pushing some buttons for folks, and they would have to start changing the way their corporate cultures operate, right? And accepting a little bit more.
You're correct. You're correct. Yeah, because just like a relationship, sometimes, okay, this is how I am in life, and I say this to everybody. Sometimes I meet somebody, be that a romantic, or just normal friendship, and the person's only supposed to be in your life for a week. All right.
Yeah.
Something significantly happens in your life, and that person was purposely supposed to be there for a week, and they made a massive change, and that's fine for them to be in there for a week. There's other people that are there for a month, others for years, whatever. I've got friends that go way back in the days, and I've had people come and go, and that's okay. All right. And it's the same thing with the business. So when I am at work, for instance, I'll give you a scenario. If things aren't working for me for that business, and I've said this before, and I've said that to my boss, and I said, well, obviously things aren't right. You need to get someone else for the business because I'm not right for the business. And you aren't right for me because I won't allow, and I don't appreciate that happening in the business. And I treated it as a relationship with a friend, relationship. And I spoke literally like that. It's obviously, we're not compatible anymore. And that's cool, because everything to its core is exactly the same. Friend, business, lover, it doesn't matter. At its core, it's exactly the same. So if it's not working in the business that you're working in, God, it's time for me to move on, because it's not working for you as a business, and it's not working for me. And
Yeah.
that's cool.
And we just need to get a little comfortable with the uncomfortable too in that
Yeah, it
front,
is. Yeah,
because
yeah.
I've had that conversation, even just talking about my business and offering a talk, and I say my price and someone, oh, that's like far too much. I'm like, okay, no problem. Like, we might not be a match. If your budget changes, let's have a conversation another time. That's all right. I'm not offended. I'm not trying to push you into buying
Yeah,
something you don't want to pay for. That's,
yeah.
the value match is obviously not there. But it's uncomfortable, right? Then the person wants
Mm,
to apologize. Oh, no, it's not that. Of course I valued it, and you might be like, oh, it's not enough, it's too much. So maybe I better change what I think I'm worth in order to accommodate. And there's a difference
mm,
between, I think, negotiating a price, right? And
mm,
saying, that price is not going to work, but here are the other things I can do to give you value that equates to maybe something along those lines. And me saying, I'm getting a benefit from doing this particular event. And so
mm,
I am happy to reduce my price because I get value from being at this
mhm,
place in a different
mhm,
way. But it is super uncomfortable still. Like, having that conversation at work is hard.
mhm,
Hi, I don't appreciate this negative thing you've done. Maybe it's illegal if you're a
mhm,
lawyer, right? And
mhm,
how do you
mhm,
have that conversation? And then someone's like, oh, you're accusing me of being da da da, right? And so we have to be able to be uncomfortable, but we also have to be confident that we can make decisions that just align with ourselves, right?
mm,
I'm not a bad person because I don't prefer this behavior or this activity, or, I don't want to stand for that in my life.
mm.
I'm allowed to say, it doesn't make me someone who doesn't care about my career, someone who doesn't know how to just suck it up. I don't have to suck anything up.
Yeah.
I just need to operate in alignment with the way that I feel good working. And that is where all of the stress and anxiety and overthink can start to evaporate, and that consistency can come back, because you're not sitting there burning all your energy worrying about whether or not they're going to do something even worse next time, or you're
Mm.
going to have to be pushed in a direction you don't want, or you're doing work that you hate, that doesn't align with your strengths. So yeah.
It's quite interesting. And when it comes to money and charging, or just stealing anything, when it comes to emotionally charging money, just a situation where you're actually swapping skills, swapping money, it doesn't matter. But I put it down to one thing. I always had difficulty talking about money, charging money, etc. I'm an organic helper. I just like helping. I really don't like talking about money. But this is how I got round it, and this is how I
Yeah.
understand everything. I put it down to one thing. There is no such thing as money. There is no such thing as anything like that or similar. There's only one thing you've got to remember, and that's the currency of trust. You can charge whatever you want as long as the trust is strong enough. The money is not the problem. It is the trust which matters. And if you charge £1 for something and they don't take it for £1, that means that trust isn't high enough. If you want to charge 10,000, you can, but you just need more. You need to bank more trust.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to the currency of trust. That's the currency of trust in your relationship, one-to-one, with your friendship or whatever. So if you're trying to convince someone to go on holiday with you, yeah, and you've only met them for the last 2 weeks, and you go, let's go on holiday. How much trust do they have for you to go on holiday with them?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to someone who you've been with for a year. It's the same thing, be it money, be it trying to convince someone to do something with you. It all comes down to the currency of trust. I focus on the currency of trust, and then I'm not anxious about anything else,
Yeah.
because that's what it ultimately comes down to, the currency of trust.
Well, it's trust, but it's also value, right? Because someone just might not want the thing you're selling, right? Or
Mhm,
they might not think,
mhm,
and that's not entirely about trust. It might just be, I don't know. Like, I would love it if someone wanted to trade immigration law expertise
mhm,
with a talk.
mhm,
Like,
mhm,
some law firm I want to pitch. Like, would you? We'll say this out loud on the podcast. Any law firms that do immigration law want to trade an hour talk for figuring out some immigration stuff for traveling to the U.S., for example,
mhm,
right? Like,
mhm,
I even if that would only amount to $1,000 in real life, and I would charge more than that for my talk, I value that thing. And so I would be happy to trade it even for something that I typically charge more money than that for, let's say.
mhm, mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but I need to need that thing and want that thing, right? And so both people have to be aligned in what they're looking for as well. Um,
Totally. Yeah, I
So,
get that. I get that, but you still need the trust for that to
no,
happen.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get you. There is, it's, yeah, the value. I get that. God, you're interesting to talk to, Sarah. I like
I'll
you.
pick apart anything you ever want to say, Eli. We could debate it to the absolute nth
I
degree if
get that
you wish. I love
nitty
it.
gritty. I must admit, interesting conversation. But unfortunately, Sarah, we have to move on. This
All
podcast
right.
has gone for ages now. It has gone on forever. And I could go,
Oh,
but do you know what? I made a rule because I'm a bit of a chatter. Some of my podcasts went on for 2 hours.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought to myself, no, who's going to listen to me for and the guest for 2 hours? So I
Right.
tried to keep it down to an hour. So listeners, unfortunately, we're going to have to go soon. But before we do, Sarah, what's one thing that you can give of wisdom to the listeners that will resonate for them for a very long time? That one thing, not three, not five, but that one.
This is something you should really have warned me about, Eli.
No, that would
Seriously.
be
Oh my
boring then. That's
God.
why I have the conversation.
I know, but now I'm gonna panic and stand here with like a deer in the headlights. Um, One thing.
So we're
I mean,
talking
we
about ADHD people here. Okay, for instance, and for them to be successful or to be confident or what is the best thing you can say to them as if you were going up there speaking and someone had spoken to you?
yeah, I think the biggest thing with ADHD is that we deserve to trust ourselves, that we're
Mhm.
not broken, and we
Yeah,
can
thank you.
stop
Perfect.
there.
Yeah,
No more words. One thing, not three. Got it.
broken. That's no, that's beautiful. And I said this to someone the other day, and I saw this. This is quite sad actually, because I saw on Instagram someone said, you know, as soon as I found out it was ADHD, I hate being broken. I had to reply to the person. I said, but you're not broken. You're actually gifted. And I'm so glad you brought that up because so many people believe they are broken. And that's the worst mindset you can have. And
Right.
that is the most beautiful thing you've said is, please, you are not broken. Please carry on. I rudely
Yeah,
stopped you.
that's really it. Is we aren't broken. We're not here to be fixed. We're here to add to any business, any relationship.
Mm,
And you'd be surprised how when you operate in a way that really just lets yourself shine, how many people you attract to yourself that are
mm,
exactly aligned with that,
mm,
right? And
mm.
so, you
Totally.
know, just staying a little bit confident that you are not broken, that you can trust yourself to make a decision, and that nothing you could possibly decide is wrong, right? If you're a resilient ADHDer, you'll
Mhm,
figure out a way to fix it or change it or
mm,
adjust it so that it works for you. And some of the best things that have ever happened to me have come out of things that seemed like really bad decisions, right, at the time, or societally would have been seen as a bad decision. How many people thought, what a terrible idea for you to leave your very
mm,
well-paying lawyer life
mm.
to be a circus clown? It's
That's
like,
true. I like
right? Like,
that. Yeah.
best thing
Yeah.
that ever happened to me. I feel ease. I feel calm. I feel, sure, I still feel overwhelmed. I'm running a business. It's not an easy thing. It's not like you leave
It doesn't.
something and it's
Yeah.
simple. But despite it being harder than anything I've had to do as a lawyer, it's easier in a very strange way. So yeah, I mean, we're not
Mm.
broken. Trust yourself. You're doing it right. Just keep going.
And what I would also add to that is that you don't have to try to appeal to everyone. And if you don't have to try to appeal to everyone, then you don't have to reenact and act different parts. Remember, you're not trying to be the Amazon of the world and take over everywhere and everything. How many people do you want to appeal to? How many friends can you have? 10, 20, 30? There's billions of us out there. You just have to appeal to the exact right people within your life, be it a partner. Um, so you might as well be generally you, because you're bound to find at least 30 people that you will get on with. That's your ideal friends, partner, business, whatever the case is. So why try to appeal to billions of people?
Right. And you've told me that we are out of time, but I do want to also say
Hmm.
that it is so incredible who you're actually going to attract to you
Mm,
when you do your own thing. And
mm,
and when you focus
hmm.
on looking for those people, like where are the positives, right? If we sit around saying, "Oh, I'm broken. Look how I'm never on time. Look how I don't work well in the mornings. Look how I da da da," then you're feeling like a failure, and you're putting that vibe out into the universe.
That's right.
What about bringing in people who think, "Well, isn't Sarah just a scintillating ball of fire?" Right?
Yeah,
But if I
yeah.
can show up and say, you know what? I don't take calls before 10 o'clock in the morning, and even that is pushing it. And I only work from 10 to 4 in my own business,
Mm,
except like meetings anyway, and everything else
mm,
I do on my own time.
mm.
That is who I am, and that is what I want. And oh, look, there are a whole big crowd of people doing the same thing and being successful, but I wouldn't have seen them if I was just thinking I and everybody like me was wrong. Because
Yes,
those people, I would have said, oh, they're wrong too. I would have subscribed to the societal view of it
that's true.
and not notice that, wow, they're thriving
Yeah,
over there. They're happy. They're just doing their own thing, looking silly, but I like it, so someone else must. And look, they have a business out of it. So,
totally. No, you're totally right. No, that's the right mindset to have.
mhm.
Um, Sarah, how can people get a hold of you if they need you? Actually, before we go down that road, how do you help people within the business? Do you do one-to-ones, groups?
Yeah,
Do
I
you do
do.
corporate? How does that work?
Yeah, so corporately, I do talks or training. I do conferences. I do keynotes. I do sort of smaller group.
Hmm.
I maybe call it consulting if you want. I'm still working out what exactly I want to call it, but helping organizations to understand that ADHD is human and that
Hmm.
it's a benefit that adds to your culture and your work. Um, One-to-one, I do, again, not really sure what I'm calling it these days, but it's very short term. It's sort of one time, 3 times maybe. I'll meet with people who have maybe seen themselves in my story, either online or in a talk, and want to have a conversation with someone that understands ADHD. I've had people come to me who are having
Hmm.
challenges in their
Hmm.
legal work and feeling they're not on top of things. So I
Okay.
act as a bit of a cheerleader or a tool. I give them tools and apps and things that they could try maybe.
Hmm.
Um, and I've dealt with people who don't know if they even have ADHD. They just want to have a conversation and see how I knew and all of that.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I do hour-long sessions. If you happen to be in Toronto, I give deep discounts if you're willing to come near me and walk around outdoors, because I need exercise and it's hard for me to leave my house sometimes. So yeah, those are the two main things that I do at the moment. And
That
yeah,
sounds
otherwise just trying to give of myself on these podcasts and share as much as I can for individuals that don't have necessarily the opportunity to hear from me in a corporate setting or a legal setting.
so. How do they get in contact with you?
I'm most active on LinkedIn. I
Hmm.
am very slowly building a YouTube channel, so we'll make sure we link this thing to me
Hmm.
once I get off of
Hmm.
here. I'm on the London Speaker Bureau, if for those folks in the UK that might be interested in a chat. And I have a website, growthcounsel.ca, and you have to spell it COUNSEL if you want to see Growth Counsel. And .ca is important because there's a law firm in the US at the .com. So
Ah, okay.
lots of info, but LinkedIn is a great place. Sarah Ennor, find me there.
Okay, so as always, listeners, I'll have the information down below. Copy and paste, click away to your heart's content. But don't forget, she's had to live her life, ADHD. She understands how you may feel. She understands exactly. And after the in-depth conversation, I mean, come on, she obviously knows what she's talking about. She even had me against the wall at certain times. So, if she's resonating with you, just have that conversation. She can help you from a corporate point of view, one-to-one, and just have that conversation. She's the lady for you. You know she is. Go on, make the call. In the meantime, Sarah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you giving your valuable time to us.
Thanks, Eli. I don't know if you say that about all the girls, but thank you for the plug. It's been a pleasure debating, sparring, and chatting with you today. So thanks for
Yeah.
inviting me on.
Yeah, the sparring, definitely. I've got two black eyes to show for it. So,
Oh, come on. I
oh,
was gentle.
oh God, it was that gentle. Oh my days. It was fun, Sarah. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank
coming. I
you.
really appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
listeners, just like, subscribe, do all those wonderful things, comment away. And in the meantime, sayonara. Sarah, thank you. That was
Yes,
a
sir.
pleasure.